Hi everybody, I'm the greatest living inventor, and today we are doing the first chapter of my book, What's Wrong with Physics and How to Fix It. This is the cover, okay? So I'm just rushing through it, okay, like we did with the previous book. What's wrong with physics? Okay, so it's W, 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 P. Okay. W, 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 P. And how to fix it. Okay, so this is I'm just rushing through it. I'm sorry because we don't have time. Dedicated with love to my mother, who gave me the endurance to overcome challenges. The problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem. Captain Jack Sparrow. We need diversity of thought in the world to face the new challenges. Tim Berners-Lee, inventor of the World Wide Web. The soft overcomes the hard. The weak overcomes the strong. The infant's bones are weak and its sinews soft, but yet its grasp is firm. When things have become strong, then they become old, which may be said to be contrary to the Tao. Whatever is contrary to the Tao soon ends. Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. Back cover. Do you wish physicists could develop a natural intuition for higher dimensions or the quantum paradoxes? What if I told you there's a special group in the population that can? What do you think the physical science community could achieve with the same powerful model that was used by the computer science community to develop, without money, managers or employees, the system that runs all the supercomputers, most of the web, and probably your phone? Okay, so I'm skipping the contents. This book, What's Wrong with Physics? WWWP. Allow me to summarize this book for you, first in 3 paragraphs, then in 10 paragraphs, then in a chapter, and then I hope you will read the whole book. In the beginning of WWWP book, I'm using a terminology of a medical mystery, like House MD. In the WWWM book, I'm using detective story terms. In this way, I'm hoping to spice up the twin books a little so that you won't notice that WWWP is about education and WWWM is about management. Okay, WWWP in 3 paragraphs. Your new patient, physics, was just rolled into the ER, emergency room, with symptoms of total multi-system organ failure. She is suffering from a disease you've never seen before. You diagnose the underlying pathogen as a lack of natural intuition for quantum mechanics, higher dimensions, and acute deficiency of fresh ideas, lack of diversity. If you don't stabilize her condition fast, you are going to lose her on the operating table. There is no use consulting the medical manuals. This new kind of malady requires an unorthodox cure. In a glimpse of inspiration, you turn to today's most powerful software technology. What if the same techniques that made Linux made by a worldwide community of hobbyist volunteers, much better than Windows, made by the richest company employing the top experts, can be utilized to save physics. You prescribe collaborating with the collective mind power of worldwide youth in a model that encourages cooperation and not competition. But you realize that's not enough. The patient's critical state requires a more drastic measure. Left with no other option, you call upon tomorrow's cutting-edge software technology and come up with an experimental treatment that is physics' only hope, tapping into the unspoiled perceptions of newborn babies with interactive virtual reality simulations of the physics that we cannot feel. Okay. WWWP in 10 paragraphs. Problem 1. Daycare center is too late. The basic idea of this book can be found in a panel discussion held Friday, June 1st, 2012 at the 5th Annual World Science Festival in New York. Watch it on YouTube here. Or search for it, Quantum Biology, The Hidden Nature of Nature. There on minute 23, more precisely on 23 Enigma, 23. There on minute 23, more precisely on 23 Enigma. Anyone? Haha. Seth Lloyd, who is a professor of mechanical engineering and physics at MIT, says that at a very young age, the mind is open to understand intuitively the strange world of quantum mechanics, QM. According to Lloyd, when babies grow to be 3 months of age, they gain the notion of object permanence, but lose the quantum mechanics. Something can vanish or appear into or out of thin air ability forever. And the proof of that is that they start to enjoy playing peekaboo, that they know daddy is still there. I would like to emphasize that I did not copy the idea from Lloyd. I came to the same conclusion independently, thinking about what's the most powerful computer we could build on Earth theoretically, and I came to the monstrous idea of wiring together the brains of all the people and using them like a grid. Then I arrived at the conclusion that it would be more powerful to create it out of babies, because their brains contain more nerve cells and their arrangement is more flexible. From there, I started thinking, what could babies understand with their superior mental flexibility that we adults can't? And I immediately thought of a subject that's very close to my heart, higher dimensions, like the 4th dimension or the 5th dimension if you count time as the 4th. And then I regressed from that to other counterintuitive realities like quantum mechanics. I will also dedicate a chapter to visualizing the 4th dimension. Problem 2. Physics needs its mother. As you probably know from all the books like Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by John Gray, men and women think in a different way. Now, there is no question that in general men are better than women in doing mathematics and physics. But there is also no question that they are obsessed with their big ego and always fighting and competing to show who is best and to master the other side. So, if we want to hunt a mammoth or conquer the neighboring tribe, then men are the better choice. But if we want to run a huge, complex projects like modern science that require working together in cooperation and not against each other, that require taking in lots of details, like the wife can immediately find things in the fridge and the husband cannot find even if it stares him in the face, and not just narrowing with tunnel vision on one task, that require admitting weakness and elaborating about your difficulties and not playing tough like you can do it all by yourself, where it's most fruitful to share your findings and give what you have to others, understanding the power of many different diversity of fruits and berries, each with their own vitamins, etc., and not just one that is best protein of the hunted animal, that require emotional intelligence, seeing nuances and understanding feelings, because science is a human endeavor. People with imagination and creativity and researchers are not robots that you just command. Encouraging the delicate flower of education and curiosity in every individual, and not just the most promising winners. All these things require the management of women. As an ideal example of what's possible when mathematics and physics meet a woman, we have Emmy Noether, who's not only the mother of modern algebra, abstract algebra, but also gave the world the deepest insight into physics ever, that symmetry and conservation law are closely connected, and showed us exactly how. Given that so much of the latest research in physics relies on symmetries, it's fair to say she is the mother of much of modern physics as well. On top of that, she raised the Noether boys, her students, who became important mathematicians, and she gave them from her own ideas generously without taking credit. Please note that I'm not talking about the women that we have in managerial positions today, because they are simply men disguised as women, thinking and acting as men, or sometimes worse. I'm talking about real women. Since we can't replace all the men in administrative positions of science with real women who manage in their smart way naturally, we need to artificially employ the essence of the feminine way. This can be done, and has been done very successfully, as you will see in my second solution. Okay, solution 1. Synaptic plasticity. In old Japan, ninjas nurtured the newborn's palmar grasp reflex. Otherwise, this ability degenerates. In the same way, infants before peekaboo can grasp quantum mechanics intuitively, or else lose this ability forever. Use it or lose it. We should create virtual reality simulations from the best physics textbooks in each subject, so they are accessible to babies, scaled up and slowed down. When the baby grows, he or she can become a scientist and apply this intuition to equations. Solution 2. Linuses Law. Linuses Law says, if enough people look at the problem, the next little step toward the solution will be obvious to someone. This principle was used by a huge volunteers group to build Linux, the operating system behind most internet servers and most smartphones. We should create a worldwide extracurricular activity like math scouts for school or math clubs for older youth along the same open source method. This will work collaboratively, not competing with each other, learning from the best textbooks in the world in each subject, critical, which will be transformed into a series of short video lectures in the local language and will be watched individually in a virtual learning environment like Moodle. The important thing is not to be deadlocked by the winner takes it all, like the Millennium Prize problems, Nobel Prize, etc. We need a new algorithm for rewarding every contribution ASAP, proportionally to its importance, and especially those that enable others to continue. Today's stupid algorithm of reward after years he or she who made the last step and crossed the finish line promotes secrecy and hiding your breakthroughs from your rivals. Okay, Chapter 0, summary of the book. I'm just drinking something. Okay, page 8, 15 minutes. We're fine. Each page took 2 minutes. Okay. Symptom, religionization. Unlike my WWWM book, here in WWWP, it's clear to the public that there is a problem. See this beautiful article, Einstein has left the building, by the journalist John Horgan in the New York Times, on the same principle as Elvis has left the building. The theoretical physicists themselves are also aware that there is a problem. See the following books: The Trouble with Physics, The Rise of String Theory, The Fall of Science, and What Comes Next by Lee Smolin. Not Even Wrong, The Failure of String Theory and The Search for Unity in Physical Law by Peter Voigt. Lost in Math, How Beauty Leads Physics Astray by Sabine Hossenfelder. If you haven't read them, here is a summary. Physics lost touch with reality and is becoming like a religion. Not asking problematic questions, ignoring the non-elephant in the room, which is nonlinear systems. Looking for the Holy Grail, the theory of everything. I read they have something similarly pointless in math, Langland's program. Speculations that cannot be tested. The Trouble with Physics, Not Even Wrong, Lost in Math. Occam's Razor versus Multiverse. At this point, the reader may ask himself, so, is this another book that rides on a trendy wave? The answer is no, in two respects. One, I recognize the real underlying problem. The above are just symptoms. Two, I bring simple solutions to cure the real problems. Problem 1. Counterintuitive. No one understands quantum mechanics, not even Einstein, who said, God does not play dice. Our intuition is fixed at infancy to old physics. We need a new intuition for modern physics. Physicists can calculate mathematically, but they don't have a feel for it. That's because all people are hardwired to everyday Newtonian mechanics shortly after we are born. So anything else like quantum mechanics or higher dimensions is non-intuitive for us. We cannot imagine them visually in our mind's eye. Even parts of electricity and magnetism are not intuitive. See the great teacher Walter Lewin. Problem 2, Murica. Yes, I know we talked a lot about America in WWWM, but in WWWP we will discuss other aspects of capitalist society. Winner takes all. Let's go back to Einstein. While Einstein was putting the finishing touches on his theory, he was really worried that David Hilbert will beat him to the finish line and take the credit. See in Wikipedia, relativity priority dispute. Imagine if Einstein had decided not to share his ideas with Hilbert. Most likely we wouldn't have general relativity today. Hilbert encouraged and helped. In fact, some people say it should be called Einstein-Hilbert field equations. Because our reward, recognition, money, fame, system is winner takes all, we nearly missed one of humanity's biggest achievements. I think this unhealthy form of competition can be seen everywhere in physics. Suppose you are a budding suppose you are a budding physicist choosing your career path. On the one hand, there is a big and important question where many have tried and failed. On the other hand, there are many small and unimportant questions that The cheap, which in salaries means fast, product, even if it's a worthless product. That's why we have the best brains working on social smartphone apps instead of space exploration. That's why we have cheap products from China that are worthless and the quality products disappear. And that's why we don't solve the big problems. Anti-intellectualism. We can see this everywhere in American thinking. Culture heroes are athletes and actors instead of people that use their minds like scientists, who thanks to them we are alive. Little kids that like science are bullied at school because they are nerds or geeks. A girl that likes science is outcasted. Nerds are all the same. They all love Star Wars comics and cosplay. They are all socially inadept, especially with the opposite sex. They are weak and lack coordination. They are short and very skinny or very fat. They are very pale. In fact, they are 99% white or East Asian, and so on and so forth. If that's how you portray your smart young people, see for example the Big Bang Theory successful series, is there any wonder that people are ashamed to appear smart? Inventions. So back to how America killed science. Most of the patents that are registered are just sitting closed in patent offices and were only registered to prevent from the competing company to gain an advantage on your company. Profitability. A cure for cancer is not profitable. That's why no one finds it. And if some young researchers would find something, it will be concealed in the archives as unproven. In the same way, the superconducting super collider, which was cancelled, which also caused the cancelling of the UNK proton accelerator in Russia. In parentheses, Wikipedia says the Russians stopped because of, the Soviet Union collapsed. But that doesn't sound like the real reason, because the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. And in 1993, there was lots of work on the accelerator. Close parentheses. Another example is the space exploration, which sounds impractical to the masses, so it stopped immediately after the communism stopped being a dangerous alternative to capitalism. Idiocracy. Naturally, not all people are born the same. Some are smart, some are stupid, some are in between. But in the European culture, even simple folks admired the smarter people. They didn't see them as their equals. They wanted to learn another language, to play an instrument, to look smart, so they can upgrade themselves. Then came the American culture with the false notion that everybody is equal and everybody can do anything, which they call the American dream. By the way, this translates as you can be rich even if you were born poor. And largely it's just false. But back to the matter at hand. In a culture where intellectualism is punished and the idiots rise to power, see the masterpiece Idiocracy by Mike Judge, where scientists who warn about the climate change are scorned and dismissed as fake news, and the truth is bought with money and with how confidently you repeat your lies. That's a very bad intellectual environment, very bad intellectual climate for physics or indeed any science. Just like people are judged by how much they're worth in terms of their bank account, period, never mind that they stole the money from the public in a legal way. So does any activity judged by whether it looks cool or entertaining and how much money does it get you here and now. Short term. When an American CEO comes into the company, he fires half of the employees without concern that they are left broke and essentially die, and outsource the production to China or some cheaper country without thinking for a second what will happen to the workers, and then give himself huge dividends and move on to the next corporation. There is no loyalty to the country or the people, no long-term planning, and no tomorrow. In the same way, when deciding the future of physics, which is done by the editors of the leading professional journals like Nature and Science, let's say that a layman like me comes up with a genius idea. No one will ever read it. Furthermore, even if you have the right title and credentials like prof from the Ivy League, but your idea happens to be in a field that isn't considered fashionable or hot, then good luck getting it published. Solution 1. QM-Land. This solution is basically my now defunct project QM-Land. Okay, this is the... Okay, new intuition is born. This solution is basically my now defunct project QM-Land. So I feel it's appropriate to use the intro presentation I once made for QM-Land. I will elaborate a little about each slide in the presentation. This was the logo for my now defunct project. The QM stands for quantum mechanics, and the land part is like Disneyland or Legoland or Phantasialand, meaning a wonderful theme park for kids and their parents. But in my park, the audience will be toddlers, and the hands-on experience in the attractions will contain head-mounted display and haptic gloves, etc., that will allow the babies to explore the magical world of quantum mechanics and allow them to develop a feeling for that miniature world's surprising rules. No one understands quantum mechanics, not even Einstein, who said God does not play dice. Albert Einstein, one of the founding fathers of QM, is the best example for understanding it mathematically, but being frustrated for having no physical intuition for it, with his famous quote about QM's probabilistic nature. The other frame is the famous thought experiment Schrodinger's cat, again by one of QM's fathers, trying to demonstrate how paradoxical it is to us with a cat that is in a half-alive, half-dead state until we watch and then it decides. Our intuition is fixed at infancy to old classical physics. We need a new intuition for modern physics. Here is the famous double-slit experiment by Thomas Young. If photons pass through two slits, they interfere like waves. But even a single photon, a particle, interferes, as if it's going through both slits. I will dedicate a chapter to making sense of this from a lay person's viewpoint, using what Wikipedia calls hydrodynamic quantum analogues. In old Japan, ninjas nurtured the newborn's palmar grasp reflex. Okay. Otherwise, this ability degenerates. Here we get to the meeting point between nature and nurture. In the TV movie The Last Ninja, from 1983, which I personally consider the best martial arts movie that I've ever seen, and believe me, I've seen a lot. Lately it came out as a DVD and I recommend it heartily. Here are two short scenes from this awesome movie. Flashback from the last ninja's childhood. He's out with his father, the master ninja, on the house porch. The kid is hanging in mid-air, hands in supination, holding on to the roof beam. His father is sitting and reading on the rocking chair. Do your arms hurt? How long have I been doing this? You started in your crib. Now you are 13. I mean, how many hours? Almost 2. Well, when can I calm down? Smiles. When I stop shaving my head. Stay up there. Why? Because if you'll calm down, I'll beat you with a stick. Chuckles. I always have to do this. So busy, so curious. Hang there, be quiet. We'll talk more when you are 20. I'm hungry. Stop jabbering, I'll feed you in an hour. Another flashback from years later. The last ninja has grown up and is about 20. He's out with his father, the master ninja, by the sea. The young man is hanging in mid-air, hands in pronation, holding on to a tight rope tied between the two rocks. His father is sitting and reading on the rocky shore. I want to calm down. Your arms hurt? Swinging. No, I'm bored. Stay up there. Why? Because if you'll calm down, I'll beat you with a stick. I'm hungry. Calm down in 2 hours. What are you going to do? Watching you makes me tired. Taking a nap. The young ninja keeps hanging. This sounds far-fetched, but it's actually true in real life. Most of us cannot hang on to something like a chin-up bar, etc., much longer than 1 minute. Apes, on the other hand, can hold on to a branch for a very long time with no effort, because the structure of their hand is different than ours. But a newborn baby can do it. Babies can hold on and carry their weight almost right from after they are born. Of course, it's an evolutionary trait from the early days of humans when we were living on trees, etc. And the baby hang on to his mother's long hair, etc. In this way, you can retain this ape-like ability in humans. The ninjas knew this and nurtured this natural ability to longer and longer periods. And so, they were able to keep this ability alive and kicking when the baby grew up to be an adult ninja. In the same way, infants before peekaboo can grasp QM intuitively or else lose this ability forever. Now, from the allegory to the moral of the story. We already talked about Seth Lloyd and peekaboo in the context of quantum mechanics. This context is a new thing, but long before this context, in the 1920s, the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget discovered that babies understand object permanence, understand that something cannot just disappear, when they are around 8 months of age. Lloyd says 3 months. In an article in the journal Science called Extensive Migration of Young Neurons into the Infant Human Frontal Lobe, which is quoted in the magazine New Scientist called How Brain Cells Move Through Newborn Babies' Brains, you can find the explanation for this. It turns out that from birth until 5 months of age, lots of neurons, nerve cells, migrate into the frontal lobes of the brain, which are responsible for higher thought processes. These cells turn down the activity of other neurons. The frontal lobe plays a large role in voluntary movement. It houses primary motor cortex, which regulates activities like walking. The function of the frontal lobe involves the ability to project future consequences resulting from current actions. it also has other functions less relevant for us. So this is a biological explanation, neurons shutting down, why we lose the potential ability to understand QM. Personally, I also suspect that the same holds true for visualizing higher dimensions and maybe even for understanding intuitively non-linear processes like the exponential function. That's why people don't understand climate change, etc. On the subject of higher dimensions, I refer you to a book called The Scientist in the Crib, What Early Learning Tells Us About the Mind, by Alison Gopnik, Andrew Meltzoff, and Patricia Kuhl, that describes how babies focus very much on the edges of a shape. That's why they take great interest in stripes and in a bullseye. Their minds work like an artificial intelligence computer that is trying to understand the object in front of him. It's the same for us grown-ups if we look at Tesseract, four-dimensional cube, in Wikipedia and watch the wonderful animation there by Jason Heiss. We will be baffled as to where the shape begins and ends, what's inside and what's outside, and so on. I think if we show these kind of things to babies before peekaboo, they, unlike us, can eventually make sense of it. The term tesseract was coined by the British mathematician Charles Howard Hinton, a visionary, double meaning, pun intended, who dedicated his life to devising creative ways for us adults to peek into the fourth dimension. Hinton lived in the second half of the 19th century, and we will dedicate a chapter to his achievements in seeing what can't be seen by adults. Okay, I wanted to do this I even bought wooden cubes in Amazon and planned to paint them like Hinton, but the delivery didn't get here and there was trouble, but I don't have this chapter eventually, sorry. By the way, I have a small theory within a theory here. Maybe people who have profound understanding of dimensions, such as Bernard Riemann, one of a handful of the greatest mathematicians of all time, who was the first to suggest using dimensions higher than merely 3 or 4 in order to describe physical reality, in his doctorate lecture, which is the most famous mathematical lecture in history, Riemann set the stage for Albert Einstein's great theory of general theory of relativity. Anyway, Bernard Riemann, ever since his early childhood, was shy and suffering from numerous nervous breakdowns. Unfortunately, biographers don't attribute much importance to toddlers, so we don't know what Riemann was like as a baby. But suppose Riemann suffered nervous problems from birth. Could it be that his turn-off migrating neurons were stopped because of his problem as a baby, which allowed his mind to grasp dimensions so well? Okay, next slide. We created graphical simulations for higher physics textbooks so they're accessible to babies. Back to our main subject. Is that the best that we can do? Pretty animations? No. What we should program are interactive virtual reality simulations for small baby-sized headset and haptic gloves that will allow the baby to move and experiment naturally and develop his or her intuition for these wonderful worlds that escape us adults. In the 4D department, I'm glad to say I was already beaten to it. One less it cannot be done question to fight. You can see here the lines that say stereoscopic view, yes. I'm giving you a link, Wikipedia, list of 4-dimensional games. As you can see, there are different systems to show 4 dimensions. Parallel projection, perspective projection, 3D section. On top of these, you can add changes in color or temperature or fogginess, focus, or any other attribute to indicate another dimension like 4D depth. One of them that comes close to ideal in concept is 4D toys by Mark 10 Bosch, which lets the user play with toy blocks, toy building bricks, which are 4-dimensional shapes, move cross-section to see where they went, etc. You can watch a demonstration here. 4D toys, 2 minutes review. HTC Vive by Ben Plays VR. Or an explanation here. 4D toys, a box of 4-dimensional toys, and how objects bounce and roll in 4D by Miegakure. What about quantum mechanics? I can hear you ask. Well, the closest things I could find to my plan are the book Interactive Quantum Mechanics, a book by Sigmund Brandt, Hans-Dieter Dahmen, Thilo Stroh, that was published by Springer. It's a follow-up to their book, The Picture Book of Quantum Mechanics. The most relevant part for us is the computer program called InterQuanta, which can be downloaded for free from Springer's website here, giving you the link. This allows you to see and move forward and backward through time what happens to the tiny particles or waves. So what I imagine needs to be done is taking this and turning it into virtual reality, VR, immersive experience. I think the best way to do this is to use Wolfram Mathematica. If you don't know about it, check out the Wolfram Demonstrations website, where you can navigate to physical sciences, physics, quantum mechanics, and play interactively with graphical applets demonstrations, in parentheses, after installing the free computable document format, CDF player, close parentheses. I usually don't like to rely on future technology when describing an available solution, but when you read in their forum this post by Romano Domenico from the University of New South Wales, okay, so the post is WSS 18, Augmented and Virtual Reality Implementation in Wolfram language. And especially their response at the bottom line, giving him the staff pick, I think we can pretty much guarantee this feature is coming to Mathematica. MathWorks, the makers of MATLAB, already has virtual world objects. By the way, Jaron Lanier, the father of virtual reality, in parentheses, although Ivan Sutherland, the father of computer graphics, made the first virtual reality system, the Sword of Damocles, in 1968, close parentheses, gave a lecture, okay, so Jaron Lanier gave a lecture about using VR for doing mathematics. You can watch it here. Perimeter Institute, Canada, something. Funny anecdote that Jaron tells on minute 35:12 of this lecture. Okay, I'm quoting. Quote, "Back when I was in my 20s, my friends and I, at the time, we couldn't imagine a distant future when we will have our own children. That seemed like such an incredibly weird and remote idea that wasn't possible. But we made a pact that if we did have our own children, we'll put them as babies in VR goggles and switch them on to bigger ones in their sleep and raise them in a 4-dimensional world where they'll develop 4-dimensional intuition. And of course, when my daughter was born, over 9 years ago, and I tried to imagine explaining this promise to my wife, and I thought maybe this was a promise I could break. And my other friends haven't done this either, of course. It will be quite a project. But I told my daughter about it, and she was like incensed that I hadn't done it. I could have grown up in 4 dimensions and I didn't get to. And she said, well, it's not too late. You should make me any possible 4-dimensional thing that you can. So by you make it, this means get a graduate student to make it. We all know what that means. And so I got Andre to make that hypercube that she was playing with. And the thing about playing with a hypercube in mixed reality is that you really can develop intuition for it. Not instantly, but after a while playing with it. Okay, end quote. How cool is that? That's exactly my project, except of course I don't want to force or deceive anybody, just like kids in my generation played Pac-Man and knew how to make the difference between the 3D reality and the 2D computer world, so will babies in the future know how to make the difference between the 3D reality and the 4D computer world. Sorry. Later, in that lecture on minute 41-43, he even mentions quantum stuff. Quote, to answer the question that I misheard you say with linear algebra, I'm really interested in, Microsoft is putting something that I didn't hear into this thing called Minecraft, which is like a virtual Lego world that kids like for making another word that I missed. And I keep on imagining these blocks being matrices and being able to do matrix operations with the blocks to maybe teach kids quantum information. End quote. When the baby grows, he or she can become a scientist and apply this intuition to equations. Okay, so here are pictures of the amazing Countess Ada Lovelace, who was the first person ever to program a computer, before the first computer was even built. She was the daughter of the poet Lord Byron, who abandoned her and her mother 1 month after Ada was born. Ada's mother wanted to keep her from following in her father's footsteps, so she was tutored in mathematics, science, and logic from an early age. Some of her teachers were very famous, like Mary Somerville, the queen of science of her time, and Augustus de Morgan, inventor of mathematical induction. By the way, speaking of nerve problems in childhood, she was often ill, beginning in early childhood. At the age of 8, she experienced headaches that obscured her vision. Ada's mother clearly had the financial means to buy her the very best education. But now back to our project. What if we cannot afford to buy our newborn babies a top-end virtual reality VR headset like Oculus Rift? First of all, we should strive to. When my grandmother was a child, she was taught French because it was the fashionable thing to do. I envision a society where the comparative advantage is the ability to understand science and mathematics better, given by loving parents starting in infancy, through fun and exciting 4D games. Just as yesterday employers preferred to hire a francophone for the new job, so tomorrow they will choose the Hintonian. I made up an adjective in honor of Charles Howard Hinton. The young man or woman who can see, both visualize and understand quantum mechanics, space-time, strings, etc. Note that although many of the older programs in the list use red cyan paper, anaglyph, 3D glasses, the kind that was included in magazines. We cannot rely on such a cheap technology because we want it to be immersive. The baby turns his or her head and they see the expected change in VR. Even if we cover the walls, floor and ceiling with screens, it's not good enough. How can the baby rotate the hypercube he or she is holding in his or her hands? So second of all, if you cannot afford the high quality virtual reality VR equipment, the solution might be something like Google Cardboard, which turns your smartphone into a wearable and responsive VR glasses. For example, I have Nox Next from Nox Labs, which is a headset made of cardboard into which you strap your phone. I will dedicate a chapter to VR in general and Google Cardboard in particular. Come experiment it yourself because understanding is fun. In the next page are the last 2 slides of the original video trailer, not necessary for this book, but just for the sake of completeness. Okay, so I'm just showing you. It looks like this, and the logo was this, the Alternative Guide to Science and Technology. Solution 2, Ramanujan 2. This solution is basically my now defunct project Ramanujan 2. So I feel it's appropriate to use the intro presentation I once made for Ramanujan 2. I will elaborate a little about each slide in the presentation. Okay, Ramanujan 2, $1 million questions. This was the logo of my now defunct project. If you don't know who Ramanujan was, I suggest you read the wonderful book The Man Who Knew Infinity, A Life of the Genius Ramanujan by Robert Kanigel. If you prefer to watch a movie and only watch one, do yourself a favor and watch Ramanujan 2014 film and not The Man Who Knew Infinity 2015 film, because the former is so much better. This book will contain one whole chapter about Ramanujan, but I want to stress an important point straight away. This book's idea is not how to find a new genius like Ramanujan to solve a problem by himself in a big leap. Instead, this book's idea is to combine many average people so that together they can gradually solve the problem in many little steps. Another unusual point that I intend to include in the Ramanujan chapter is effect of ethnic culture in terms of both genetics and tradition on the mathematical ability. So this chapter will be a little racist, but in a good way. The Millennium Prize problems are 7 problems in mathematics, each with a $1 million prize. This generous motivation that the Clay Institute offered is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, of course, it gave the problem huge publicity and recognition in their importance. In a world obsessed with money, it gives an excuse for people to think about things besides everyday trivialities. On the other hand, by giving the money and the fame only to the person who made the last step in the proof or disproof, it deters people from collaborating and sharing what they know, because they have the usually false hope that they can solve it all by themselves and be the winner that takes it all. I will dedicate a whole chapter to how the prize and credit system should be reformed to bypass this difficulty. Professors in their ivory towers cannot solve the problems because some new ideas are here needed. Okay, some new ideas are here needed. A famous quote from Feynman. The idea here is that the mathematicians that graduated from the canonical universities with the standard textbooks will have the same background. All have the same background. Hence, they are thinking in a similar way and have a hard time being original. Furthermore, they worry about their positions and occupational stability and do not even dare to venture into risky waters of hard problems like this, where many greater mathematicians failed in the past. The new answers must therefore come from a new generation with new ideas and unconventional education, or at least a very diversified education. By the way, in the picture is the wonderful Paul Erdos, whom you can watch a documentary about called N is a Number. And also there is a book, The Man Who Loved Only Numbers. Sorry. The boy in the picture above is Terence Tao, who is now probably the best mathematician in the world. In the chapter about leveraging diversity, after Scott Page's lecture, I'll discuss how we can encourage different ways of thinking. 56 minutes almost, okay. The solution is Linuses Law. If enough people work on a problem, the fix will be obvious to someone. This slide shows Linus Pauling, the father of Linux, the most important open source project in the world, driving most of our internet servers and cell phones. The GNU wild beast is the symbol of the GNU project, and the penguin is the symbol of Linux. Their philosophy, which is described in the nice book The Cathedral and the Bazaar, is this. In software development, you can either employ a few wizards of code, writing code that only they get to see, like Microsoft Windows, or employ a huge community of volunteers that way get lots of eyes on every line of code, so there's much greater chance that someone will catch a nasty bug and someone, maybe someone else or several people incrementally, will be able to fix it. So the end result is that Linux, the bazaar, where anybody can contribute, is much better than Windows, the cathedral. Basically, that's the core of my book. Apply open source ideas to a field which was up until now reserved to experts, higher mathematics. Now, the obvious question that comes to mind is, where can we find a community that is up to this? We have already seen that the one problem that was solved, Poincaré conjecture, was solved by the awesome Gregory Perelman. I'm sure you heard about him and his admirable modesty. Perelman is in part a product of St. Petersburg Lyceum 239, that is considered to be the best school in Russia, and its after-school math club. You can read about it further in its biography, Perfect Rigor, A Genius and the Mathematical Breakthrough of the Century, by Masha Gessen. The problem with the math club is that it leaves out most of the population because they are not smart enough. It also gets a social stigma, for example, only for boys, which discourages half of the potential population. The solution to this is what I called in my previous book, the Strulovitz system, meaning in this context, taking the best textbooks in the world and breaking them down into short video lectures that are more digestible, while weaving the material into subjects that are more interesting for the students, such as computer graphics. Most of the kids already like computer games, etc. So I suggest bringing a lot more mathematics into the normal classroom in the shape of recorded video lectures which the students can also watch at home, and relying heavily on flipped class and computer-aided learning, because the average teachers are not the best venue to first present these ideas to the kids. By the way, even in Perelman's level, they have an online forum called Arxiv, where Perelman published his solution. But I suggest making a closed forum for each class where kids can discuss freely and help each other, in parentheses, and reward them for doing so and punish kids who are disruptive to others, close parentheses. This chapter would be like, sorry, I didn't show you the picture. Okay, so it's the open source method powers most of the infrastructure for the internet and smartphones. This chapter would be like discussion of how to best implement the Strulovitz system in a compulsory but fun way to the masses, from preschools through primary schools and middle schools and up to high schools. We make commentary video lectures for high math textbooks so they are accessible to everyone. In addition to bypassing the average teacher's mediocracy in teaching, the computer-aided model of teaching and flipped class also enables the shy students to study at their own pace and for the stronger students to advance and not be bored. The main point is giving the best teachers through videos and so on to everyone and not just to the top of the gifted students. Note, I already wrote this chapter in my twin book WWWM. The chapter is titled Protected Learning. Okay, this will allow people who normally lack the means to participate and maximize the number of minds. An important process that should accompany this should be redefining cool as being brainy, smart, rather than being brawny, athletic. This echoes things that I'm trying to do in some of my current and past projects, Brainyland and especially Camp of the Braves, which is a youth movement modeled after the Scouts model that deals with learning mathematics and open workshops for kids and youth in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics subjects, and especially ones aimed at girls. This was attempted in my past project, Girl Power, which slogan was "From a clerk to an engineer," which later developed into Brainyland. Also, my project of Brainyland's Gifts campaign was supposed to do just that in a small scale. But imagine if every few blocks had a public open community makerspace aimed at girls. In the chapter What Happened, I'll discuss how we can make STEM cool. Note that there is already a section of What Happened in WWWM. But basically what we need to do to make it cool is what China did with classical music, where it's considered civilized and smart for a young person to know how to play the piano, for example. This was the situation in the West before introducing of the pianola machine, an automatic player piano, to every household. People, both young men and women, earned social points for knowing how to play classical pieces. They did not lose social points like today when you're called a nerd. We need to bring this healthy change that China did to the whole world and also make it so in physics and mathematics. Come solve it by yourselves. Sorry, come solve it yourselves. We have pictures of me. Because discovering is fun. Okay, here you can see me, hardly the best teachers in the world, but better than nothing, laugh out loud, explaining things from the best textbooks. On the left, if I remember correctly, from Experiments in Topology by Stephen Barr, and on the right, Introduction to Linear Algebra by Gilbert Strang. On my now defunct website, Ramanujan 2. In the next pages are the last two slides of the original video trailer, not necessary for this book, but just for the sake of completeness. Okay, I've shown you this. It's the picture of Strulovitz. Okay, so so that's it. That was my first chapter of my book, and I'll see you in my next invention. I hope it was clear, and thank you very much. Goodbye. Thank you.